How can I?
नहीं मेहताब जी बाद में.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. A constitution amendment bill has been moved today as a special agenda. And of course, the Honorable Speaker has the power to accept any bill. But as the previous speaker, or the previous speaker to the previous speaker, Mr. Jitendra Reddy was mentioning towards the end of his speech, that there are certain amendments to this bill. This House is bereft of moving any amendment to this bill. That has been withdrawn by the machination of the present government, the manner in which this bill has been listed today. These are all technicalities which perhaps most of the political parties wanted to do away with or have agreed to with the government. But I would initially express my opinion on that this should not be the practice, no matter whichever party is in government. Here is something which is being done for posterity. New history is being made today. Attempts have been made since 1980 that there is a need to identify the economically weaker section of the society and provide them and support them with affirmative action. Reservation in our country has been nothing new, and as has been rightly mentioned, then since the pact between father of the nation Mahatma Gandhi along with Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, which is normally told as Pune Pact, since that day the process of affirmative action has come into operation. It was in 1932, pre-independence. I would mention 4 instances where affirmative action, or as we call it, reservation procedure, was incorporated into our constitution and our law-making system to provide adequate support to the weaker section of the society, to the deprived section of the society. Pune Pact of 1932 was specifically keeping aside 148 seats for depressed classes in provincial legislature and 18% of the seats in central legislature. This was the agreement. And that's how the division or the fissure that was being created during that period of time, Gandhiji took up on himself and the then Congress party also. All the leaders were asked to lead movements and to bring in those depressed classes into the main fold. Lot of things happened during that period of time, which is a part of history today. Subsequently, in 1937, seat reservation for the depressed class incorporated into the Government of India Act of 1935. Legislation by the British designed to give Indian provinces greater self-rule and set up a national federal structure that would incorporate the princely states. This act introduced the term scheduled caste. उससे पहले scheduled caste के शब्द ही व्यवहार नहीं हो रहा था, वो रख रहे थे depressed class. 1937 से scheduled caste शब्द आया. In 1942, when large number of leaders were behind bars, but there was a government. War was there, World War. And in 1942, Ambedkar gets the British government to accept his demand for reservation in services and education. ये इतिहास जानने की जरूरत इसलिए है कि ये रिजर्वेशन इन सर्विसेज and reservation in educational institutions started by Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar in 1942 and subsequently 1947 in the Constituent Assembly. A specific provision was made, scheduled caste reservation. In that Constituent Assembly, the representation of scheduled caste was 6.5%. And the Brahmin representation in Constituent Assembly was 45.7%. And a अच्छी किताब भी निकली है कि कौन से मेंबर क्या-क्या इशू उठाए, कौन से मेंबर क्या-क्या अमेंडमेंट दिए at the making of the Constituent Assembly. That makes a very terrific study to find out how the mind was being applied on certain interested groups, for certain interested groups, to bring in the whole society together. And I would say at that point of time, despite Brahmin representation being 45.7% in the Constituent Assembly, they encompassed not only the Dalits or the depressed class or the scheduled caste, but also the tribal section of our society. And that is how in 1947 or after 1947, in 1950, when the Constitution ensured safeguards for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. In 1953, already it has been said, the Backward Class Commission was formed under Kalelkar. In 1963, Supreme Court rules that total reservation cannot cross 50%. अभी तो हाल ही में बार-बार हमें कहना पड़ता है कि इंदिरा साहनी केस ये हुआ, but in 1963 there was a case where it was also said 50% से अधिक नहीं होगा. And in 1978 the Mandal Commission formed to consider quota for disadvantaged caste. It suggested reserving 27% seats for other backward castes. In 1989, I remember the day in the Central Hall, we were in the gallery to see what is going to happen. Because the largest party that was elected declined to take over the power, and the leader of that party said, this mandate is against me, I will wait for another day, another time. And a government was formed. And in that time, BP Singh announced implementation of Mandal recommendation in government jobs. It meets with widespread resistance. I did not recollect or did not remind this House what happened subsequently, both in Delhi and in other parts of the country. But in 1992, Supreme Court upholds 27% quota for OBCs, says creamy layer should be excluded, and that was a 9-judge bench decision, which puts cap of 50%. In 1995, the 77th Constitution Amendment to Article 16 allows continuation of reservation for SCs and STs in promotions. In 1997, 81st Amendment permits reserved vacancy backlog to be...
Please.
So I am yet to come to the bill.
Please.
In 1997, 81st Amendment permits reserved vacancy backlog to be treated as a separate and distinct group to which the ceiling of 50% does not apply. And in 2000, during Atalji's time, 82nd Amendment inserts a provision in Article 335 to enable states to give concessions to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe candidates in promotion. Later, the validity of all these amendments was challenged in the Supreme Court. In 2006, Supreme Court upholds amendments stipulates that states will have to show reasons before making provisions for reservation. And in 2007, UP, Uttar Pradesh, introduces reservation in job promotion. And in 2011, Allahabad High Court rules it unconstitutional, citing Supreme Court decision. And in 2012, High Court decision is challenged in the Supreme Court, which upholds it by rejecting the government's argument, saying the Uttar Pradesh government has failed to furnish insufficient valid data to justify the move to promote employees on caste lines. This explains the history which has happened during the pre-independence time and subsequently after independence till the date which I have just now mentioned. And while going through the bill today, I find it very interesting, and it needs to be supported in full measure. Because when we talk of economically weaker sections of the society, the question arises, didn't it occur to anyone earlier that there are so many poor people in and around in the rural area and also in the urban areas? Whenever we move around in our constituency, we find not only the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe poor people, the backward class people, but also poor people of the general category and who are in need of education, in need of services, in need of employment. In that respect, when this bill came up, the first reaction in my mind was, didn't any previous government had actually thought of it? It had. It was in 1980, the Congress in its manifesto had said, we would implement this type of reservation when we come to power. पर ये सारा चीज एक ही स्लोगन में बह गया, a government that works. That was the slogan in 1980. But this commitment which was given in their manifesto was lost track of. And subsequently, when Mr. Narasimha Rao became the Prime Minister, that time while implementing the Mandal Commission report, that time he also made a government order which was subsequently challenged in the court of law. I would only mention here that attempts were made by respective government during last, how many years? Since 1980? Now we are in 2019, around 39 years. That yes, economically weaker section of the society needs to be identified and they should be provided affirmative support. But today, this government has come out with a constitution amendment. So in that respect, I would say for the first time in our democratic republic today, history, economically...
Conclude, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Economically weaker sections of the citizens are being provided the benefit through affirmative action. Article 15, Clause 4 and 5, and Article 16, Clause 4 provides reservation for people as per caste. But here, as per their economic status, reservation is going to be provided both in services and also in employment. But the question arises, madam, we have to work further. We have to work further in the sense the economic criteria will not continue as it is today in first week of January 2019 will be the same in 2024 because economic ladder, through the economic progress, a family may progress further. a family may also come down in the economic strata. So what will be the mechanism of identifying, or once one is identified, as it is happens, once one is identified in a caste line, he is identified in the caste line because he doesn't change his caste. He cannot change his caste. But in an economic criteria, this needs adequate refurbishment every 10 years. That is not there in the bill. How you are going to identify, how you are going to delete, it doesn't happen. As we encounter during our constituencies visit, a person who was rich yesterday or 10 years ago was denied a Awas Yojana. But today he has become a pauper. Shouldn't the society and the government provide that much of economic support to that family? That is another issue which is connected with identifying an economic thing. But our party, Biju Janata Dal, is in full support of this. I remember in 1991, when the Mandal Commission issue was going on, that time somebody asked our late lamented leader Biju Patnaik, what is your view on this? He point blank, as he always do, गरीब का कोई जाति होता है क्या? Does the poor have any caste? A poor is a poor, and he needs all sorts of support from the government and also from the society. Today we believe that the same slogan is being propounded through this bill. Poor has to be identified, poor has to be provided all sort of affirmative support from the government, and that is what is required. But for the first time, as we are moving away, that's why I gave a history since 1932 till this date, that was on caste line. Okay. That was on class line. This is for the first time, though attempt was made earlier, this is for the first time the identification of the beneficiary would be on economic criteria, and that needs to be upgraded invariably in a time period. I would like to understand from the minister how you are going to meet this challenge. Providing 10% of reservation in educational institution, in employment is one thing. I don't know how many of them will get that in due course. Of course, many of them will do that, will get that support. But how do you determine a person who is economically weaker gets into the service and he earns certain amount of salary? Will he continue in that category, or will he be out of that category? And that is another challenge which this government has to meet. Yes. And you have rightly so have left it to the state government that they will determine. That is the best thing that you have done. I support this bill. Our party will support.
Jitendra Chaudhary. Now please come.
Thank you, ma'am.
Then 5 minutes, 3-4 minutes if you can.
At the outset, I, on behalf of my party, Communist Party and the Marxists, taking part on this bill. Madam, in principle, we are not against this bill. Rather, our governments, successive governments in the West Bengal, Tripura, and now in Kerala, we have been implementing the similar programs, though not in reservation or in this fashion. But, Madam, there is the question